Hey everybody, Richard Harris and Scott Leese here with another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. We are quickly approaching the 60th episode within less than about maybe 100 days. So we're been working and grinding for a while, and we're happy to do it because we think it's been a lot of fun for us and certainly for our guests, which leads us to our next guest for today is the one and only Mr. Scott Ingrim. Scott likes to be known as a quota-carrying sales rep, even at this stage of his career, although he's done a ton of stuff with the sales success world, the Inspired Marketing podcast, Relationship One. He's kind of all over the place, right? So we're so glad he could find some time to chat with us. So Scott, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Been looking forward to this.
So it'll be interesting to see how confused I get between the two Scotts today. So
I think it's confusing for you. Try being us. What if it? There's a the LinkedIn series that Mr. Ingrim did, and there's Scott Barker is also on it, and I think there's another. Isn't there four of us?
There's four Scotts. Yeah.
Who's the fourth that I'm forgetting?
Scott Douglas Clary.
See, it's just four of us. So the
Four
fourth
Scotts.
power.
Scott Leese, we should do an episode with all the Scotts.
Oh my
and
God.
I'll just ask a bunch of questions of you. Hey,
And
Scott,
you could just say, "Hey, Scott." Yeah.
Yeah, hey Scott, and then I'll let the four of you battle it out for dominance of the microphones.
Whatever Scott
Scott-
Leese says, I agree.
Yeah. So Scott Ingrim, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to just sort of start with some background. I gave you people a little bit of context of the things you're working on, but can you share a little bit more about what you're doing specifically, just so they have an understanding as we have this conversation today as to where your experience is coming from?
Yeah, let's talk about present day, and if you want to dig into history, I'm happy to do that. So my day job, I carry a $3 million quota. I work for a professional services firm that works predominantly with large, all of my clients are Fortune 500 companies who are using the Oracle Marketing Cloud. So I am a legacy Eloquin. I went to work for Eloqua before they went public, so rode that particular company through their IPO. We were public for 1 quarter, and then we were acquired by Oracle, and that was kind of the beginning of what today is the Oracle Marketing Cloud. And they've made quite a number of other acquisitions that kind of fit into that. And they were my favorite implementation partner when I was selling Eloqua. So fast forward a few years, I joke that this is as close as I can be to Eloqua without having to work for Oracle. It's just way too big of an organization for me. I joined Eloqua, we were about 300 people, and I woke up one day and was working for Larry Ellison and 130,000 other people. So this is a great spot for me. And then about 3.5 years ago, mostly out of a frustration, I've consumed so much sales content over the course of my career. I've always been kind of a student of the craft, and I recognize, I'm like, you know what, all the guys not all of them, because Scott, you did a good job of writing a book from a very current perspective, but a lot of the content that I was reading was written by folks who probably hadn't had a quota in, on average, some number of decades. And I thought, you know what, I want to hear from the people who are killing it right now. What are the very best doing in this environment? And that's where the Sales Success Stories podcast was born. And I only interview active quota carrying individual contributors who are either the number one top performer, or I joke, I'm willing to settle for the top 1%. So if somebody's number 2 on a team of 500, I'll take that. That's pretty close. So there's been a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Richard, we can't hear you.
I said that I guess that's why I've never been on it, and I won't take offense to it.
Yeah.
Scott, you also put together an event.
I do. So, yeah. So there's been a lot of things that have started to spin off from that podcast and from those relationships. So every year here in Austin, the next one's coming up in October, we do the Sales Success Summit, and it's the same kind of thing. It's a very intimate event, a couple hundred people, and every single person on the stage is one of those folks that have been on the podcast. So they're real sellers. And what's so cool is we're all learning from each other, right? There's no extra agenda. None of us are trying to sell books or training or consulting or anything else. It's really just, hey, we're all busy carrying bags and trying to figure out how to get better at what we do every single day. And it's really just incredible what comes out of that experience.
You used the word that that I've been using to describe, our surf and sales events, and that word is intimate. But
Yeah.
I use it in the context of, look, we've got 20 people, right? And you used it in the context of a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that, right? Obviously 20 is more intimate than 300, 400 people, but conceptually, I think we're on the same page that these smaller kind of events and the more intimate kind of experiential type gatherings are more valuable and more important than 100,000 person convention center get together, right? So elaborate on your thought process around the power and the impact of the smaller, more micro conference type events.
Yeah, love that question. In almost everything I do and the way I think about so many things, I think that in almost all cases, quality trumps quantity. And when I think about who I want to spend time with, it's not about having thousands of people in the audience and everybody just kind of sitting in rows and absorbing. It's really about having an experience and having conversations. And I think when we think about events, and it's something that I've done a lot because prior to this current role, I worked for an event marketing technology company. So I was selling a platform to CA Technologies to run CA World, and I was selling this platform to AT&T to run Pebble Beach. And I was, it was because I wanted to learn this space. And big events are fine, but I think there's so much more power in really finding the people that want to be there, that have this really strong desire and seek out this type of growth and this type of learning. And I talk a lot when you think about the value of events, there's two things. It's the content, which is the obvious thing and the one that people sort of think about and what they promote, like, oh, here's our speakers and here's the things we're going to talk about. But the other element, the other dynamic that is often overlooked is the connections. Who are you going to meet? Who's going to be your next mentor? Who are you going to be able to collaborate with and just build even kind of mastermind type of relationships with? And I think about the traditional event. If you look at the half-life of, hey, I went to this event, I got all psyched up, and that the pace at which that wears off is extraordinary, to the point where like a week later you're back to doing what you were doing before.
Yeah, I call that the sunburn effect.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly it. Like it wears off pretty quick. Like you might need some aloe that first day. Like it's really intense, but it's gone in a week. And so I really look for, how do we create something that's much longer lasting? How do we make sure that the right people in the room, and it's funny, I kind of downsell that event. I don't want to convince somebody to come, because if you take convincing, you're not my people. Like I don't really want you there. And what's fascinating to me is the people who sign up the fastest are the people who are on the podcast, who I explain what's going on. And a lot of times before we're even done recording, I've got a payment in my PayPal account, because it's the people who need it the least that seek it out the most, and they're at the top because they've always done this. This is the way that they have developed themselves and invested in themselves and sought out those experiences, that type of content, and really sought to surround themselves with other people like themselves. And that's the challenge with being number one. You don't have anybody to go look up to inside your own company. So you have to go look outside and find people who are going to continue to challenge you and push you to find another level, even when you're already at the quote unquote top level.
Yeah, it's interesting because I love, Scott's analogy of the sunburn effect and your point about the aloes, that the thing that we seem to strive for the most. And even if I go to a big event, right? Even if I do go to Dreamforce or something, I call it the in-between moments, right? It's the conversations you have in between that last a whole lot more than the content, right?
Exactly.
If you can walk away with one or two content things that you can approach, that's pretty good. But you walk away, from Surf and Sales, you walk away with 15 friends, right? We've got a Surf and Sales mastermind group that's now from all 4 of our sessions, and there's about 40 of us in it, where we just still share stories or share thoughts and things, and sometimes we'll joke about what happened at Surf and Sales, and we keep that connection there, which is really, really important. So I love how you've been able to sort of take that concept and also expand it a little bit by use of your podcast, and sort of to your point, you know, the top 1%ers already know to sign up because that's how they get better, by listening to other 1%ers. And hopefully people listening will sort of grasp that and sort of, you know, take that as a huge takeaway from this, is to make those efforts. So I love that you're doing that. So
yeah, well, the thing that you guys are doing even better than me, but something that I'm super intentional about, is it's also the experience, right? We connect with people through shared experience, and so, you know, the things that I'm doing in my event are, we host it at the Alamo Draft House, so it's in a full service movie theater. Like, when was the last time you went to an event in a movie theater? So the presentations are on a giant screen. There's people bringing you food right to your seat, so you don't have to go do the cattle call buffet line thing. And it creates more of that opportunity to have those in between meetings. And then I also recognize we are antsy people. We're not very good at sitting still for very long. So I never do more than 90 minutes of content in a row before we've got 30 minutes to process, right? Like, talk to other people. And then, man, we're in Austin, so we load people up on buses, and we make that part of the experience, and we put beverages on the buses, and we drive people down to the Salt Lick, and we have some great barbecue and have that experience together, and we have a great after party experience together. It's those experiential elements. Now, I'm not taking people to Costa Rica and taking them surfing, so again, you kind of one-upped me there, but those elements are so important, rather than, hey, do you remember that shared boring conference experience that we had at name XYZ Expo thing that we went to? Like, they all run together. There's no differentiation.
Feel free to run a contest, Scott. Ingrim. Scott Ingrim. You know, someone gets a raffle ticket to go to Surf and Sales that of course you end up sponsoring. So we're happy to take that person.
There
We'll just merge the two events together and have a 300-person surf trip.
That's awesome.
When this is all over, everybody will be so desperate to go somewhere and do something. We might be able to have that many people come.
I tell you what, although what's crazy is, for a couple of years now, I've been working towards this idea. I'm no longer working toward this idea. I had this concept of what I call the President's Club cruise. So this idea of like a cooperative President's Club, because the last two companies I worked for have been too small to have President's Club. Like, it'd be awkward to send Scott and Tom on a trip by themselves, right? So why couldn't we bring smaller companies together to do this experience? Right now, the cruise idea is feeling not so good.
Yeah.
I'm not getting on a boat.
No, that you may never get back off of again.
Can we talk about this for a little bit, the kind of current situation? And I hope you don't mind me sharing a little bit of what we talked about offline. But
yeah, happy to talk.
You were able to successfully bring in some business over the course of this week, actually. Yeah. And, you know, everywhere you turn, you know, people are freaking out, trying to figure out, should I call, should I email, should I sell, what do I do, and all this. So as somebody who's got a big quota right now, and you're selling to the Fortune 500 right now, which is, you know, probably scrambling like everybody else, like, what are you doing right now? What is your mindset to continue to be successful and productive? And it obviously is working for you, because you closed some business this week. A good chunk of business.
Yeah, let me kind of contextualize that in a couple of ways. So, you know, in a lot of ways, I'm very fortunate in most of the accounts I work with are ongoing relationships, right? So there's not a lot of net new in what I'm doing. However, this week, so we're talking on a Thursday, the first full week of April, and so far this week, I've closed $189,000 across 4 different deals, and I'm not done yet. I've got another couple that I'm hoping to bring in this week. One of those is a new division within one of those companies, so it's new-ish, and then another is kind of a restart, another division of a different organization, one that's been in the news quite a bit here lately, who used to do a lot more work with us. They've been pared back a lot, and I'm in a very fortunate place. I've been talking with my boss about this for the last year, recognizing at some point the market is going to turn. We're going to have another recession. Now, we didn't anticipate this by any stretch, but we know things don't ever go up forever. And we've been thinking about and talking about what does our situation, what is our experience in a downturn. And it's good to be in services in this scenario, because one of those clients that this is one of the open deals. We had a conversation yesterday, and they have taken it on across the board 20%. They've asked everybody in the organization to take a 20% pay cut and to work 20% less. That's the way that they've decided to weather the storm. But the amount of work doesn't decrease by 20%. And so they're having to lean harder on firms like us to kind of pick up that slack and help them do that. So some of this is a little bit just kind of fortunate based on the circumstances. But what I've been doing, and the reason I've been able to pull this together, is I've been saying for the last 3 weeks now, there is no such thing as too many conversations. And I have found it is easier than it has ever been to talk to my executive stakeholders, because they're not in wall-to-wall meetings like their normal schedule is. They have a little bit more bandwidth. And if you're thoughtful, the other thing that I've been trying to do, and man, I'm not as good at this as I thought I would be. I would do my research and do a little bit of due diligence and look at, okay, how is their stock performing? What is their business? What are the likely impacts to them during this time? How are they likely to be reacting? And I would bring some opinion and an idea or two. And some of it was, I just would sort of share my guess and ask them to validate or confirm or deny or educate me. And I had one of the best conversations. I mean, I have an incredible relationship with a very, very senior. I'm trying to figure out how, maybe I'll just name the company. There's only a couple thousand people who listen to this, right? So look, I have
that was
one of my,
I can't tell if that was a compliment or just a backhanded slap or what.
No, I'm trying to balance. Okay. Here, I have a very senior stakeholder that I work with. And again, it goes back to relationship that I've been able to build over a long period of time, because at this point, he's pretty removed, probably 2 steps removed from the work that we do with his marketing team on a day-to-day basis. But we've got this great relationship we have maintained. And I've even called him out on it. I'm like, why do we still have this monthly cadence call? Because we don't really need to do it. And he paid me a giant compliment. So, you know what, I just enjoy talking with you, right? Like, you challenge my thinking. I always get something out of it. And so we've continued that. And he was one, I'll just say, it's a very, very diversified organization. There are parts of that business that are very much in the news. They're producing products that are very, very, very much in demand. But at the same time, there's other parts of their business, because they're so diversified, that, they're working with oil and gas, and they're just twiddling their thumbs. And so I went in with that, with some point of view and some thoughts about what was going on. And he gave me this just incredible education about their business at a deeper level and what this was meaning to them. And, he said, the bright spots in our business, they're as bright as they can get. We've got them turned up as high as they can go. And for us to do more, it takes us 12 months to stand up another production line. We can't do it any better or go any faster than we already are. And then we're starting to talk about the executive and board level decisions that are being made and how they're starting to position and how that's going. The point of all this is having all of those conversations and just listening really well, having some thoughts if there were places that I could add some value or some ideas that I could bring from other clients because the more of these conversations you have, the more value that you can add to the next conversation, because I can talk about, hey, I just talked with this guy over at this company and here's what they're doing. Here's how they're seeing this. Are you guys reacting that way? Or are you taking a different tact? And through that process of having those conversations, understanding how they're positioning, thinking about, okay, given that dynamic, how do we support you through this time? How do I reposition and tweak my offering and come up with something that's, and again, the value of professional services, I can do sort of anything, right? I'm not stuck into my product does X, Y, and Z and it costs this and that. I'm able to be crazy flexible in what we're able to do and meet them where they are. And it's been extraordinary. We're just very well positioned
So,
and had the relationships and all these things to be able to make it work.
so Scott, I have a question for you. Well, two questions. One is, because I agree with you, you can have more of these conversations. One is, what the hell have these people been putting on their calendar for all these years
Totally.
that has all of a sudden gone away? Because they still got to talk to marketing and product development and and still, so what are they finally realizing to cut? What fat have they cut? And then the second thing is, and I'd love for you to challenge some people. I'd love for you to ask them, you're easier to get a hold of now than I've ever experienced. What are you going to do moving forward to make that better for you, not for people like me, but it seems like you have more time, which you're having these better conversations. So what do you think they've been doing all this fucking time?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, they know what they've been doing. I mean, it's just the
No, they
Scott.
don't. No, they don't. Because all of a sudden they don't. This is the part I would want you to challenge them. Was like, I would just literally say to them, "What have you been doing that's prevented these conversations before? And when
Yeah.
this all goes back to being in the office, are you going to let any of that bullshit get back in the way again?"
Totally. I mean, it's the corporate trap. I mean, this is the meetings just kind of proliferate. The world is going to look the way that we do business, the way that we operate. There's going to be a lot of really positive outcomes that come from this. Hopefully, people are going to react in different ways, but I think people are going to realize, you know what, I can trust my people to do the right thing. They can work from wherever they need to work from as long as they're getting the work done. Do these meetings that I'm in all the freaking time, do we actually need them? I mean, we talked about that before, but are people really challenging it and really pushing back on it and taking the time to have the meaningful conversations? The other thing I can't predict, I don't know what this is going to mean for business travel in the future.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll be doing less. I think we'll think harder about that too, because that's another thing. It was so easy to jump on a plane before. Did we really need to do that?
But I think the opposite's actually going to happen. Because I don't trust the American human condition. Right? We're going to all end up back in the office, and we're going to be like, okay, we need to have a meeting. I haven't been face to face with somebody in so long, right? I need a body and a presence. So on the other hand, those will be the two things, and it'll be interesting to see what the success of those options are for people, right? Will they eliminate the stuff that doesn't matter as much as they thought? Will they trust their teams more to just get the job done? Or will they all of a sudden just re-embrace this stuff, and before they know it, they're going to be right back where they were, January of 2020.
Well, at the very least, it's a forcing function to get you to think and reevaluate. And that's what we're all doing right now. We're reevaluating our structures and our processes and the way that we work and the way that we operate. And that's going to continue. At some point, though, whatever it is, we're going to settle back into the normal thing. I mean, the sunburn effect is going to come into play with this too, right? There are certain just natural gravity. The momentum is going to take us back. The trick is, and I love that you're talking about challenging people around this, is to continue to poke at it and continue to be thoughtful about it. And that's our job as sales professionals.
Yeah.
Why are you doing it that way? Is that the best way? Does that make the most sense? That's our job.
Yep. I'm less concerned about the travel side of it. I think the commercial real estate side will take a big hit. People are going to realize,
oh God, you have no idea.
This, they'll still want the office space, but I think that office space will turn into generic desks, more conference rooms, so that they can have more face-to-face when they want them, right? To a certain extent, do businesses turn their offices into a mini WeWork, right? Where
Yeah.
they can come in and just create space and take space, but you don't have to show up every day. So it'll be interesting on the real estate side. The other group that I think, I was telling my wife about this, who's going to really come out ahead in this thing are the teacher unions, right? The teacher unions are going to be like, okay, we're not showing up. We'll talk to you in 3 weeks after you do your homeschooling, right? Like, because there's not a parent in the world who's going to be like, please pay those more. Don't pay them less. Like, it's going to be, those are the people that are really going to come out. Hopefully, if they can take the business mind and stick to it. So, but I'll stop, because I know Mr. Lease has a question for you as well.
I was thinking about the real estate situation that you were talking about, and I was thinking about how the problem in San Francisco, at least, is that there's no space, so there's no housing for anybody. But there's all these commercial buildings. Well, if so many companies no longer need commercial office space like that, all these commercial properties could potentially be reinvented as,
Well, they'll be that. I have a friend who
residential
actually
space.
works. I've got a friend who works for probably a Fortune 50 company in real estate. He manages their commercial real estate. And a lot of new buildings, what they're doing is they're starting to build them in ways that they can be turned into garages, right? So that when the car goes away,
You're talking about parking garages.
they can easily convert, because there'll be business on one level, resident on another, parking garage, but also that parking garage will be for the Lyfts and the Ubers who have the automated car that you order. You order a car just like a taxi to come take you somewhere. Well, that car's got to be parked somewhere, right? And so that's their 10-year plan of how to reconvert these new buildings that are being built, because it'll be interesting to see what happens, because all that's going to shift, right? Nobody's driving as much as they used to, right? Like, that's the other industries can be hit. Like, we all kind of realize, like, I don't need to go to the store 3 times a day.
Well, that dynamic is changing so much. I heard earlier this week that there's a place in Texas where gas hit 99 cents a gallon, and I started thinking, at what point does it make economic sense for me to buy gasoline, put it in a generator to charge my Tesla?
Wow.
It's crazy.
What part of Texas is that, Scott? We need to make a road trip and stock up on.
Yeah, I can't. Now you ask me, I can't remember.
I haven't seen that price since I was in high school.
That's what I was thinking.
Isn't that the Kramer effect, where Kramer and Newman took all the bottles to recycle, and they had to figure out, how far they could drive with all the bottles in the back of the mail truck
to make it viable.
Yeah, to make it viable.
Yeah, there's an Aggie joke in there about, if you break even selling watermelons, you just need a bigger truck to sell twice as many watermelons.
Scott, you very consciously, you and I have talked about this before, but very consciously, like, you decided not to go the traditional sales leadership route, I should say. You're certainly a sales leader in your own right, but you're not managing 200 sales reps and 50,000 SDRs and all the other things that sales leaders manage. And what's interesting to me is how many people feel like they have no option to advance or kind of move up other than to go into sales leadership. And you're trailblazing the path that a lot of people could follow, right? You got a huge quota. You work with Fortune 500 companies. You successfully run, a couple different businesses, what call the podcast a business, the summit a business, right? You've got this events that you do, virtually. You've written a couple books. What do you say to people out there who might be thinking, well, do I just want to be an individual contributor my whole life? Is that going to be fulfilling enough? I don't know that I really want to be a VP of sales one day. You've kind of got a great model going, so I wonder what you might say to people out there who are trying to figure out where to go next.
Yeah, man, you're on top of the really good questions. So this is something I have really intentionally dug into a lot. Really, both of the last 2 sales success summits. We've done the other 2 full day events, and kind of the second half of the second day on both of those, I just did a series of panels to talk through the choices and the different paths that are sales. And I'll say right here, because I want to get the word out about this. During this time that we're all under house arrest, I've decided to make all of the content from those sales success summits available for free.
That's
so
awesome.
if you join the listener list at top1.fm, just shoot me a note to that welcome email. Usually I offer 1 video. I'll send you access codes to get all of it. And we dug into it a lot there. I didn't realize I coined the term. It's funny. I Googled this in quotes at some point pretty early on, and there were like 17 references on Google. And if there's 17 references, that means it didn't exist. And it's this idea of an intentional individual contributor, which is what I consider myself. And it was really, it's a lifestyle choice, right? I mean, I saw the path. I know what the sales leadership path looks like. And I feel like it's a I mean, Scott, you have a lot more experience here, but I think it's one of those things where you have to go through a process and really pay your dues again, and do the really hard work of being a frontline manager. And over time, as you become a chief revenue officer and get to the highest levels, and now that if you can get into the right organizations, the stock options and things like that really become meaningful again. But again, though, to your point, the path that we're not thinking about is, hey, if I'm just a really good sales guy, why not double down on that? Right? Why not get into a position where I can really maximize my earnings, get into a space where I love what I'm selling. I love the clients that I'm selling to. I often joke that, I mean, as an individual contributor, I have total control over my schedule. And when I do what I do, I already have 2 children. I don't want to deal with 6 or 8 more that I would be dealing with in sort of that first frontline manager type of a role. So again, it was just a very, very thoughtful, very intentional, and I have always thought of myself as someone who leads from the field. Right? I am a sales leader. I don't need the title to be able to have a bigger impact, an outsized impact. And that's really one of my driving values, right? It's that impact to my family, to my community, to my company, to my clients. I can have a massive impact sitting in this role in the way that I'm able to influence what we do as a marketing organization, what we do as a product organization, what we do as a services organization. All of those different pieces is all possible. And for me, frankly, it's easier to do without the title and all of the other responsibility that comes with it, because I'm in control.
I got a question for you. So I love what you said. You don't want to be a frontline manager. How old are your kids?
12 and 14.
12 and 14. Okay, so both Scott and I will be coming to you for advice over the next few years.
Oh God.
So let me ask. So Scott and I had a fun conversation in a happy hour with our wives, and I think we should do it again. But you know, how does your wife and kids appreciate the talent and skill you bring as a frontline manager to the family?
It is not my
Feel free to
greatest
go get
skill.
any of them to help answer this question.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh. It is not my greatest skill. I mean, it's also sort of a recognition of, I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. Honestly, this time, I feel I have learned more about managing in the last month than I have in the last couple of years. And, it's just this homeschooling thing I posted. I was joking, but not really. I said, I think there's a lot more yelling on behalf of both the students and the teachers in a homeschooling environment than there is in a traditional classroom, right? But here's what's different.
It's less about managing, right? It's more about influence. Like I've had to work on my influential skills more than my management skills, because because they just don't recognize my brilliance in the management skill set in this environment. So
yeah, but here's been the enlightening part, because for the first couple of weeks, where we were kind of on our own, my wife and I built a schedule, and we tried to kind of empower them a little bit and allow them to have input into what their schedule was. So it wasn't us dictating, it was them sort of choosing. And it's easier for me to hold you accountable to what you decided you were going to do versus me holding you accountable to what I said you were going to do. Nobody likes that. Exactly.
Right?
The parallels here are ridiculous. But then the school system came back in. And what I've seen them do that made me just smack my forehead is, we had like a pretty regimented, pretty full, I mean, there was like 6 hours of work, and it was from 9 to 10, you do this, and 10 to 11, you do this. And there wasn't a lot of breaks, and there was a lot there. They've been doing sort of this like playlist kind of idea. They're like, look, here's the stuff that you can do, and here's kind of the bare minimum. And if you're an overachiever, here's the extra things you can do. And now they're in control, and they choose when they do it and how fast they do it and how quickly they're able to get to the things that they'd rather be doing. My house is so quiet and peaceful right now. I'm like, man, when you enable people and you trust them to do the work, it's amazing what happens. It's simple. It's stupid, simple stuff, right?
Which goes back to what you said earlier about, managers are going to trust their employees. They're not going to care if they're in the office, right? It's the exact same thing. But the irony of it all is that we as humans, and maybe it's the father part of us, right? And how we were conditioned to,
Yes. There's a
that's
different management style that I grew up in.
Like we're like, oh wow, how novel a concept for parenting, and it's like, well, you kind of known this, idiot, stupid. So,
but Scott, you have 2 girls, do you not?
I do.
Yeah. This is why his house is more peaceful. I can that my
totally
house
agree.
with
Totally
my
agree.
10 and 12-year-old boy is significantly less peaceful right
Yes.
now. Right?
I agree with Scott Leese on this.
Yes.
My,
However, we are entering the teenager stage, which is very, very interesting in my world these days.
but all I hear about the teenager stage is that, they sort of go into their room at about the age of 13 and they don't come out till they're about 17, right?
Yeah.
Which
You know what?
leads
A
to
friend of mine,
quiet.
a friend of mine had some great advice around this, and it's specific to girls. But he said, and what's funny is the first time he told me, I only remembered the first half of what he said, and it took a second conversation for him to remind me of the second part. He said, there's something that happens with girls when they turn about 13, they get abducted by aliens and replaced with some other being for some number of years. And that was the first part that I remembered. And we came back and I was like, dude, I see it. This is ridiculous. Maybe I need to like leave for a while and just come back. And he said, no, you forgot the second part. The second part is the aliens bring them back about the time they turn 16, which is why they call it the Sweet 16. And he said, but you have to be there. So if you weren't there through that challenging period, then you've got real problems because they won't come back to you. So, you just keep working through it. It's like anything challenging that we've got going on in our lives, right? You can't stop. You can't walk away from it. You just got to dig into it and freaking do it.
That's really interesting. It makes me think about how companies are treating their employees during all of this stuff, and whether it's people being laid off or furloughed or reduction in salary and hours and all that. Will those people be willing to go back if they didn't feel seen or appreciated during this particular period of time? There's one company that I can think of who laid off a couple hundred people in a fairly callous kind of manner, in my opinion. And I'm just thinking, like, who's ever going to want to go work for that company again? Because all of those stories from those 300 to 400 people are going to circulate everywhere. That's got to be like pretty bad.
Glassdoor, right?
Yeah, pretty bad brand, reputation damage, right? So you got to. It's an interesting analogy the way you phrase it about how you got to be there through all the difficult times, all the hard stuff, all the alien years before you get to get back to some of the good times. So.
Well, do you mind if I step up on a soapbox here for a minute?
Go for it, man.
I mean,
I've been meaning to write about this, or I've been kind of looking for the right forum to talk about this. So, here we are in this situation. We don't know how it's going to resolve, and it's something unlike we've ever seen before, right? This is what we're going through right now is global. There's no country that's not affected. Every country, every company is being impacted by this. Here's what I hope happens. I think this can go one of two ways. What I hope people realize is this is not a time to be worried about maximizing profit, right? And letting people go and seeing your people as expendable. I think this is a time where you have to recognize the very most important asset that you have in your business is your people. And everybody's going through this right now. Everybody's earnings and revenue and everything else is going to be impacted. It is what it is. People are going to forgive you for that. What I hope that we'll do is do everything that we possibly can to keep everybody employed and with dollars coming in so that they can keep the roof over their head and they can keep feeding their families and just, yeah, I mean, it resets your mindset around all of this. Like I was taking some things for granted. I'm so grateful that I just have basic stuff and that I'm in a really solid, stable place. I work for a good company that is not going anywhere. And I know, because I've seen them do this in the past, they're going to put the people first. I hope we reward those companies that take that approach, that do anything and everything they can to take care of their people no matter what, even if it hurts. And we punish the companies that, as soon as they have the excuse, just cut people loose in a time where, are you kidding me? Finding a job right now, when, you know, in the last 3 weeks, 15 million people have filed for unemployment? Come on. That is the wrong thing to do. Like, now is that, I think, the truest test of leadership that we've ever seen in my generation, in my lifetime, to see, like, how do people react? And do you do this positively? And do you do the right thing? Or are you a freaking schmuck? And if you're a schmuck, you need to pay for it.
Amen.
I'll step down now.
I'm here for that. Sign me up. I'm here. I'm here for Ingrim's revolution, man. I'm ready. Well, we're almost out of time, Scott. Talk to us about what we can do to help you and some of your initiatives and everything that you have going on. We always try to end the show by just a small gesture of doing what we can to give back and help support our guests. So
yeah, well, let me lay out the smorgasbord. I appreciate you giving me that opportunity. I mean, all of this extra work, all this side hustle thing for me, like, it's not about the money, right? I've been extraordinarily lucky in my career and have had some great success, and I really have a need to give back and pay it forward, especially right now. So lots of ways to access the different things that I'm doing. So we talked about Sales Success Stories podcast at the beginning, very deep dive, long form interviews. About a year ago, I realized the two best things about that show are also the two worst things about it. So one, my criteria is pretty strict. So Scott, when you come to me and say, hey, Scott, I've got this amazing thing I want to talk about on your podcast, I have to say no, which sucks. So I wanted to create a more open forum, and those episodes are really long. The last episode I just released was with Sarah Brazier. She's the top SDR at Gong. That episode was 2 hours and 2 minutes. So that's a little much for a lot of folks. So I created the exact opposite show exactly 446 days ago. That is the Daily Sales Tips podcast. And I know that because we're at episode 440 something. And it's just
I can't even remember what episode we're on. I always have to ask you.
Well, I can't remember on Sales Success Stories what episode I'm on, but I can remember that one because it happens every stinking day. So, and it's just bite size, right? It's really designed to get a lot of ideas out there. And right now we're sourcing really hard. I kind of challenged the community to talk to me about what you're doing that's actually working. I'm getting really tired of here's what you should be doing and all of this type of advice. I'm like, forget that. I want to hear what you're doing that's driving real meaningful results. And whether that's revenue or it's just making your life better, right? I think we need to be a little bit more open about that. So anyway, that's what's going on. We talked about the Sales Success Summit. There are a couple of books. So the Sales Success Stories books, the B2B Sales Mentors, those are collections of stories from the folks that I've interviewed on the podcast. And then Scott, you were a part of this big, I think we're calling it Finding Sales Success on LinkedIn. It's 108 tips from 36 LinkedIn sales stars. And it's the people who I took a different lens in the way that I looked at the outward success on LinkedIn. And it's not about how many followers you have. It's really about the engagement. If you're driving good engagement in general, that says to me that you're putting good, valuable stuff out there and you're driving good, productive conversation. So all of that stuff is free. If you go to top1.fm/LinkedIn sales stars, but in general, if you go to top1.fm, that'll pretty much get you everywhere. You'll find the podcasts, you'll find the event, you'll find all the stuff. And like I said, right now, if you listen to this while we're still under house arrest, then sign up for the newsletter, and I'll send you all of the videos from the summits. There's some gold in there. We usually sell that stuff for a couple $100, but right now is the time to give it away.
I just love the fact that I'm still number 140 on the top LinkedIn people, because I didn't quite make the list. So, but as Scott,
we're gonna keep updating that list. I created a special model for that, so it's in the next big pass we'll get there.
As Scott Lethal attest, I'm the one who gives Scott these wonderful ideas, and then he goes and sort of exemplifies them by 10x, and then takes all the credit.
Amen. I talked about this the other day, but the delta between idea and action is really, really important.
Yes.
Right. So,
yes. Yes.
It doesn't always work to your advantage, but oftentimes it does.
It does. It does. It does. And you know, I mean, mindset's such a big topic right now. And you know what? You want to fix your mindset, get into action. Action comes first. Like action drives your mentality. It's not the other way around. It's not hyping yourself up to do the action.
Yeah, another famous Scott Barker, when he came to our Surf and Sales Summit, and it really struck me was he just said, you got to say yes to everything. And for me, because I'm naturally inclined to be skeptical, that's been really helpful. Like I've instituted that a lot, particularly since we've been under house arrest of like, I just need to say yes, like stop worrying about it so much and just do it. So
that's one of the things to your point earlier about trying to figure out what's working for people as opposed to what you should do. I would say that me saying yes basically to everything right now is working for me. Yeah. I can absolutely bring it back to revenue, number one. I can absolutely bring it back to increased new relationships that are turning into and spawning ideas that have brought about action, like this this website that we spun up called Skill Up that kind of talks, it's like a TV guide, if you will. This shows all the virtual events happening and where they are and who's there and all this kind of stuff. So that saying yes to everything and just trying to get out there as much as possible is working. It's also super challenging because, you know, you keep having these virtual events for the LinkedIn, you know, sales gurus or whatever, right? And I'm like, damn it, I'm already booked that time. So my calendar is like a mess, but it's working right now, at least
exactly.
That's
it. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thanks for joining us, man. Appreciate your time. As always, you do so many, wonderful things for the sales community. So keep up the good work, man. We're here to support you.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Scott. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure's mine.